We're here today with Lee. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us a little bit about your experience with your husband using medical aid in dying in Canada. Lee lives in the Bellingham area, but she and her husband had permanent resident status for a long, long time in Canada. And he chose the medical aid in dying option in Canada. And we know a lot of people at End of Life Washington are interested in how they do things differently in different countries. So thank you again for agreeing to be here with us. And I'll just ask you a few questions. How long has it been since your husband, Kamananda, died using the Canadian law?
It's been a little over a year and a half. So he died October 15th, 2021.
Okay. And I know that he was suffering from prostate cancer.
Yes. Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about how the subject of medical aid in dying first came up in the scheme of things?
Well, actually, a little bit of context is that once he was initially diagnosed, he refused all treatment, any intervention, any monitoring. So he never knew where he was in the dying process. You know, he was wearing a catheter bag 24/7. That's all we knew. Didn't want to engage in any treatment. So I just happened to be talking to a friend in January of 2021, and the conversation came up about death with dignity. I asked her about it because her mother was suffering, and she told me her mother didn't want it, and she told me a story of a friend who had engaged in medical assistance in dying, and that this friend who was elderly was suffering from multiple maladies and decided to use it, that she didn't have a 6 months or less diagnosis left to live. So that was a light bulb that went off for me, because I knew about death with dignity here in the States, but didn't know much about Canada. So I went home and looked up medical assistance in dying in Canada on the government website and started to collect information. But again, I didn't say anything to Kamananda right away because we didn't know where he was in the disease process. So it was really me who started looking and digging and collecting information.
And so then you and your husband brought it up to his medical provider as something you were considering.
So what happened is that in late September, it was obvious that he was actively entering the dying process. So I was alarmed. He had not seen his doctor in 2 years, his PCP. So I signed a form that allowed me to speak with his primary care doc, and this was over the phone. And that was October 1st, which was a Friday. So I spoke with her, told her Kamananda was obviously entering the active phase of dying. And I told her that he was interested in medical assistance in dying. And she said she didn't do it. And by law, doctors are obligated, if they do not do the MAID protocol, to refer you to another doctor. So in the meanwhile, she turned us over to palliative care. So the next day, Saturday, October 2nd, I spoke with palliative care and I said, my husband really wanted to do medical assistance in dying, but he missed the 90-day cutoff, because what we had understood on the government website was that it was a 90-day process. But in palliative care, the nurse said, no, we can get this done for you within 7 to 10 days. So that was a relief. It was a huge relief. So from there, the ball got rolling. Palliative care contacted the regional office for medical assistance in dying. And then it turns out we needed a form to fill out, which we didn't know. So this was a Wednesday. So this is about 5 days after speaking with his PCP. He completed a request for medical assistance in dying. So that was a Wednesday. And I confirmed with the regional coordinator the next day, Thursday, that she had received this form. She said yes. The following day, Friday, so we're 1 week out from speaking with this PCP, she calls me with the name and phone number of the first doctor, the assessing doctor. So this is the Thanksgiving weekend in Canada, a 3-day weekend. I got a hold of the assessing doctor. She came on a Sunday, so the Sunday before Thanksgiving, came to our home and did the 1-hour assessment. She in turn faxed her report to the regional office for medical assistance in dying. And again, Monday was a holiday, so Tuesday, I am notified that they've received the form that we're going to continue the process. So Wednesday, I get in touch with the prescribing doctor. And the prescribing doctor actually worked in the hospital where Commandant had ended up. Commandant had hoped to die at home, but he had a few things happen that I got him to the hospital instead. We were concerned short term that medical assistance in dying could not happen in the hospital, but it turned out that it could. So the prescribing doctor came up to Commandant's room that Wednesday afternoon, and they had a long talk. And in that talk, he went through the procedure. He said that the doctor was saying to Commandant, it is unerring. It is the same every time, and that it's very peaceful, effective, and predictable. And he went through what's changeable, for instance, where it happens, who you want to be with you, your environment, whatever gives meaning to you, and whatever makes it extremely personal. And the third thing he said that I made note of was that the medications in this order were first to help give a deep sense of relaxation so that it relaxes the nervous system and the muscles. Then the next medication will put him to sleep and then unconscious. And that the third medication would stop his heart. And then the reassurance was that none of the medications were nausea producing. And so the prescribing doctor said to Commandant, again, this is a Wednesday, that he needed at least 24 hours to pull together the medication and the nurse. And Commandant requested his palliative care nurse be in the room and assist the doctor. So that was possible. And they decided on a date, which was Friday, October 15th. So it was 2 weeks from the time I spoke to his PCP to the time that he was able to then use medical assistance in dying.
So I'm struck by the fact that the process was very smooth. They were willing to work with you, and they had all their ducks in a row, for lack of a better way to say it. And
all their doctors in a row.
yeah, there you go. And something that I've learned in just looking this up a little bit in preparation for talking with you is that the 90-day time period is involved when in Canada, you don't have to have a 6-month terminal prognosis.
Right.
And you can have something, for example, like MS, where your symptoms are increasing and you don't know how long it's going to be, and the doctors think it's going to go on, that they don't think you're going to die within 6 months. Then there's a 90-day waiting period if your death isn't a little more certain as to timing. And like you found, the 7 to 10 days within that time frame when somebody got the 6-month prognosis, for lack of a better way, they don't say you have to have a 6-month prognosis, but the doctors that are involved have to believe that the death is coming within a short period of time.
And so this is what impressed me, filling out this this request for medical assistance in dying. There's a section here where it says my request, and this is where Commandant had to initial. And the two things that impressed me the most were, one, I've been informed by medical practitioner that I have an incurable illness, disease, or disability. So, so there's that. And because Commandant didn't refuse all treatment, I was worried that because he didn't even try, chemo or radiation, that he was, or have biopsies, he was going to be refused, but that was not the case. Second, I believe that my medical condition is serious and cannot be cured by any means I accept. And that was a huge relief, because chemo, radiation, and biopsies were not acceptable to him. And there it is right there, that his condition is serious and cannot be cured by any means I accept. That was huge.
Yeah, the I accept part in there adds so much to the dignity of the process, I think.
Exactly, yeah. And the compassion.
Yeah. So, Lee, if you're comfortable with it, I think that most people watching this already know that in Canada, a doctor comes and gives the medication through an IV, and there's no need to drink a nasty bitter solution of 2 to 3 ounces. There is an option in Canada to take something orally, but it's in the form of pills, and not many people choose that option. So that's correct, that they give through an IV, right?
Yes, and it was, well, since I'm not a medical professional, I'm just going to make sure it wasn't an IV, like there was a tube that went down to his arm. He had the
Right.
little thing in
Oh,
his arm already. Yeah,
right,
okay.
right, that they would have hooked up that thing if they needed to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he had been having hydration IV.
yeah, yeah, okay. Um, yeah, so if you're comfortable doing so, can you walk us through what that day looked like? What happened on his last day?
Hmm. So, so they had agreed on Friday, October 15th at 12 noon. It got pushed out a little bit. It was a little bit after 1. And Commandant had made an agreement with the prescribing doctor to what he wanted. So one of the reasons Commandant wanted medical assistance in dying was because he did not want to die in a fog of morphine. He really wanted to go while he was conscious, while he could think straight, and he really wanted to go consciously, basically. So they had a little arrangement set up that Commandant would give the go and say, "I'm ready." And then the doctor gave him 60 seconds, exactly 1 minute before administering the medication. So just preview that a little bit. So when they were ready, the doctor and the nurse were ready just a little bit after 1. They came in the room about quarter after 1. Commandant was in his hospital bed. It was myself, his daughter, and his daughter's husband. So just 3 family members. We were sort of at the corner of his bed. We had already spent the morning doing our own rituals and having conversations. And so we all did what we needed to do privately, so that when the doctor and the nurse came in, we stood back because it was really his time to go. And he asked for a white wet washcloth over his eyes. So we did not actually get to see his complete face during this process. So once I gave him the washcloth to put over his eyes, he took a deep breath and he said to the doctor that he was ready. And so I saw the doctor look at the clock for 60 seconds, and then first syringe went in. So I'd say it was somewhere between 3.5 and 5 minutes. It was done. And so the doctor very kindly said, felt for pulse. And he's done this so many times. And I could see within this, I'd say the first 20 seconds, I could see Commandant's body was rested. I could tell it's like, almost like that anesthesia kind of rest where the body just completely relaxes. So it was very fast in that way. But I would say within 3.5, 5 minutes at the most, he was gone. His heart had stopped. And so the doctor told us that his heart had stopped. And, I don't remember exactly what happened after that. I think they may have asked us if they'd like us to stay or if we had any questions. And we had gone through this so many times, we were fine with it being the end. So they very quietly, I asked the doctor if his eyes were closed, because if they were open, I wanted the doctor to close them, and they were closed. So the doctor removed the washcloth and they very quietly left the room. And from the medical assistance in dying part, that was it. That was the end. So it was very fast.
Yeah, well, thank you for going over that again for us.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the volunteers watching this will have questions about other differences in Canada. And Lee has provided some wonderful websites and information that we will give you along with this video that people can click on to read up on what's going on. One of the things that you did say to me, Lee, is that similar to the US, it's constantly changing and being tweaked a little here and there,
And updated. Yeah.
updated.
I would like to just sum up really quickly. Like if I had 1 minute to tell someone what medical assistance in dying in Canada is like, I wrote it down here just so I wouldn't skip anything. First of all, he did not have to go to his doctor for an evaluation. He wouldn't have been able to go anyway. He was too sick. So it was really just a matter of me speaking with his PCP over the phone and saying he's entered the active phase of dying. Next, the assessing doctor made a home visit. I just want to emphasize, Commandant never had to go anywhere, and he was too ill anyway to be going to see any doctor. Third, there was no waiting period. And there was no second request. And looking at the end of life website with the diagram of the procedure, it looks like there's a second request involved. Is that right still?
Yes, there's a first request to the prescribing physician, a second request to that one, and in between, you're talking to the other physician, the second
Okay.
one.
And then he did not have to have a diagnosis of 6 months or less or left to live. It was the medication was done intravenously. It was administered by the prescribing doctor. So the commandant really could just kind of do what he needed to do as he knew he was going to transition out. And I just have to say, the whole system was streamlined. It was efficient. It was so dignified. It was so compassionate. And the government is very organized. It's centralized. I mean, it's centralized in the sense that it's a federal, I don't know, not benefit, but it's a right. It's there for those who want to use it. I worked with someone in the regional end of life office for medical assistance in dying, and it just made all the difference to have one person in a centralized place who was, she was the hub of the wheel in terms of getting everything expedited. It was very helpful. The last thing I'm going to say is that, it didn't cost us a penny. And I have to say, just kind of one thing to lighten things up near the end there, Commandant, he was so looking forward to dying. He was so looking forward to leaving. And he said, when we were all in the room, he said, this is so great. I'm so looking forward to this. I'm just sorry I'm not going to be here to enjoy it. And that was his humor. Just say, it's so good. I'm sorry I'm not going to be here to enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, sounds like the process in Canada left a lot of room for that type of thing. Well, thank you so much again, and thank you for providing the resources as well. And one other thing I want to ask you, and it looks like you want to say one more thing. You were a member of the End of Life Washington support group.
Yes.
So you finished that not too long ago. How was that for you? How did that assist you in your grieving process?
Well, first of all, I was a little bit ahead, if you will, in terms of the grieving process than the others. My loss was not so recent. I was already, say, about 14, 15 months out. It was so helpful to be with a dedicated group of others who came together purposely and intentionally to talk about grief and death and dying and the medical assistance in dying. That in itself was just so comforting. And I don't know, part of the healing process, if you will, just kind of just to know that I'll just talk about myself, that I wasn't alone. And I loved hearing the stories of the other participants. And as we said in the group, it helps to keep telling your story again and again and again. So I had wished it was longer, but I enjoyed it very much. And I'm glad that End of Life Washington offers this.